Quick question though. When did you guys start up DeepRisk?
2019. So
Okay.
yeah, we raised a bunch of money. We hired 3 or 4 people, all from UTD, and yeah, right now we have a successful pilot going on in a company that's doing $4 billion in volume. So we're pre-revenue, but we should get our first revenue in like a few months, and then we'll go out and scale. And that's one of the reasons we were like sponsoring this hackathon is like we might want to expand the team further, specifically hiring AI people, because right now everybody's just doing everything. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's all UTD. Like it started as a UTD project, and we hired from UTD. I am from UTD, so it's like a full.
Yeah. When did you graduate from here?
So I did my bachelor's from 2007 to 2010 in software engineering, then master's in 2012, then MBA in 2016. But between that, I've been working various companies like Ericsson and others.
Okay. Nice.
And yeah, I've been also like helping out startups in Silicon Valley. I'm part of a thing called Founders Network, where like you have the founder of Siri and all these other entrepreneurs are in that sort of closed network. And I like to help startups over there. And one of the things I want to do with this talk is maybe help encourage people to, while they're in school, right, try out ideas, because many times like talented people just, you know, get into 9 to 5 jobs and forget their passion, why they got into computer science in the first place.
I agree.
So that's really the idea. I mean, whether you work for DeepRisk or not, like if anyone here needs help in starting your own company, you have an idea but don't know what to do next, I can just help out in general.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Well, we can probably get started right now on that note.
Okay, cool. All right. So welcome everyone. This is gonna be pretty short and sweet. The goal is twofold. One is, well, I was just gonna talk about how to start AI startups from my experience of starting DeepRisk, which is in the fintech space, so risk management for banks. But then I realized when I talked to a few of you on Discord, it seems like many people even have an issue figuring out how to even like come up with an idea. So last minute, just like a startup, I modified my presentation. So I'm going to go through a bit more basic approach of how to do startups like 101. And then I will go to a very specific, okay, this is the things that you should do or avoid for an artificial intelligence startup, right? So hope you can all see the screen. One thing I want to emphasize is if you want to do a big startup idea, like if you want to build the next Google, or if you want to build like, I don't know, like a very tiny e-commerce, selling tea online thing, both of them are going to take the same amount of effort, tears, hard work, blood. So might as well go for big startup ideas. The person who's starting a business as building a store on the corner of the street, they work as hard as someone who starts a big company. So might as well use technology as a lever to exponentially increase your reach of your idea. So just my suggestion is just go for big startup ideas. Now, what do I mean by big, right? So many times people like come up with ideas that are trends or they are variations of other ideas that already exist, and that puts you in a zero-sum game situation, right? So you're building the 7th self-driving car startup, right? Whatever it is, like it's like the 15th messenger app, and so you get into these zero-sum games because like if people are already using WhatsApp, they're not going to use you. So what I would recommend is come up with something unique, something valuable, something non-zero sum, and something contrarian. Now, what does contrarian mean? Contrarian means you have an idea that 99.9% people don't believe in, that is going to work, right? The problem with having an idea that everyone believes is going to work is, well, everyone is trying the same stuff. You don't want to be in that situation, especially at an early stage when you have limited resources and it's you and your friend, hacking on some laptop. You don't want to compete with the big guys. You just want to come up with something that nobody thinks is going to work, but you believe is going to work, be a big in the next 5 to 10 years, right? So think like Bitcoin back in 2013 or Tesla back in 2014, right? Not Tesla now, Now everybody knows electric cars are the future, but you want to be sort of prescient. You want to be right, but also contrarian. Another way of putting it is like your viewpoint on the world is unpopular, but you know it's correct. Okay, and you guys are uniquely situated to do that because when you're in university or when you're young, you are looking at you're like at the bleeding edge of user experience, and a lot of the older generations are not seeing that. So something that your friends have started to use, or you see their user specific user behavior, that is like the nascent user behavior that will be mature, and basically everyone will behave that way in 10 years, right? So just building what your classmates or your young group of friends wants might be small, might look like a toy now, but it will become huge later as the world basically matures to that idea, if that makes sense. So yeah, so just summarize, make it unique, make it valuable, make it contrarian, right? One way of thinking about it is all blank will be blank in 50 years, right? So think of like, okay, all cars will be electric in the next 50 years, right? But that's the Tesla version, but you got to come up with your own thing, right? Like, okay, all let's say all transportation will be less than 30 minutes in the next 50 years if we launch through space or whatever your really far out assumptions are, right? So if you have these kind of sweeping assumptions about the future, you can kind of pull back to today and what is the one small thing I can solve, assuming that that future is accurate, right? So this is the way you can like really come up with ideas that will become huge, and that way you can avoid early competition, because as I said earlier, if you try to just do what everybody else is doing with small resources, it's very hard. So you have to come up with like a very unpopular futuristic point of view, right? Have a definite view. In 20 years, I don't know, all energy will be solar. That's it, right? And now, what are the assumptions that you can? What are the conclusions you make from that assumption? Bring it back to 2021. What can you build now that will be valuable in a few years, knowing that the world is going in that direction? Um, Here's another way of coming up with startup ideas, right? So this is one. This is another example of this earlier one is when Steve Jobs went to Xerox PARC, right? And he looked at the graphical user interface in the 80s. He was like, oh my God, all computers, personal computers will have a mouse and graphical user interface will be point and click. And so he bought the technology from under Xerox PARC's noses, got the IP and then built the Mac literally using that. But Xerox themselves developed it and had no idea that that's how the future will look like. So you have to have a very opinionated view on the future, right? Can't send out a market survey. Cannot look at a analyst forecast. You will not find a future in the analyst forecast. You have to have a belief system that this is how the future will be. I believe this. Nobody else does. But then you have to use technology to bring that point of view to the world, basically. So that's like how to build really, really major things, right? Like SpaceX and Tesla and all that. But here's another way to go about startup ideas. Convenience, right? Why can't I just? And many people ask themselves these questions, and some of these ideas came up, right? Have all of my data in the cloud. And you can see Dropbox now, right? But before it used to be very, very difficult. Like beam internet from the sky, and now you have Starlink, right? Like, why can't I do all sorts of things while I commute? Well, self-driving cars, watch everything online, Netflix. I mean, all these things seem very, very obvious in hindsight, right? I don't know how many of you know, but Blockbuster, the CEO of Netflix, Reed Hastings, literally took his company and went to the Blockbuster CEO and said, "Hey, I want to sell it for whatever number of millions of dollars." And Blockbuster board basically laughed him out, saying, "This is, uh, we're not going to buy this. We can build our own thing," and the rest is history. So many times, what we look at now becomes super obvious, but it's not obvious. When the things were happening, I mean, at the time, right? So convenience is one easy way to basically figure out what the future will be. So anytime you run into a problem which is like, this is just too hard, I mean, think of like home delivery, right? You're getting food delivered at home, groceries delivered at home. So even after the pandemic, people who have gotten used to grocery delivery at home, they're just going to be like, okay, I have this subscription, it just makes things easy, I'm buying the same stuff every week, I just hit a button, it just works. I don't have to go there and just, interact with people and, select stuff. So human beings just move in the direction of convenience. So if you just ask yourself, why can't I just? And your startup idea may be on the other side of that question. So let's say you have a startup idea, right? Now, the biggest mistake people make is they say, okay, I have this idea. I have to build the best product there is, otherwise my friends will laugh at me, or the market will laugh at me, or nobody will take me seriously. That's the wrong approach. Because when you have a startup idea, what you really have is a thesis. So what do I mean by thesis, right? So let's say you're in ancient Greece and your thesis is, oh, the world is round. Well, that's just a thesis, but you have to prove it. And they proved it using shadows and geometry and all that stuff, right? So you have your thesis or hypothesis, whatever, but you have to prove it. So a startup idea is like a thesis. Let's say, I don't know, all data should be stored online, right? This is before Dropbox, let's say, or Google Drive. Launch a very dirty version of it. By dirty, I mean like something that immediately puts that idea in the hands of the users. It can even be a really, really non-functional prototype. If you look at when Dropbox launched, they didn't launch with an app, they launched with a video of how it would work. It didn't even work then. But the video got them so many users on their wait list that they proved the market to the investors. So by launch immediately, I literally mean launch immediately. Like if you have an idea today, launch it. There is a way to launch it. So here you're looking at something called Palo Alto Delivery, right? This is the first web page of the service today known as DoorDash, which is, I don't know, I think it went public. It's a multi-billion-dollar company now. But the way they verified their idea was within 1 hour. They had the idea. They said, okay, we're in Palo Alto. Go to school at Stanford. How can we test this idea? So they just bought paloaltodelivery.com. They took images of local restaurants, put it up on a web page, put their own personal phone number under it, and just launched it in 1 hour from idea to launch, right? What happened was they got a phone call, and then they literally went to the restaurant, took the order, and delivered it to that client. Now, did they make a profit? No, but did they test their hypothesis? Yes, right? So this is what I mean by launch immediately. You cannot wait. You cannot wait. Like if you just stay in your room and coding and programming and with your friend and never launch it, you have no idea how the users are going to respond. So you have to launch immediately. Now this is all of startup operations. This is just one slide, and I know it sounds simple, but that's all it is. It's you get user feedback, whether it's using online tools or sitting next to the user or however you want to do it. Then you take that feedback. You don't try to take the feedback directly, right? Because like Henry Ford said that if I asked what people wanted, they would have said faster horses. So you have to take the feedback, but you have to really find what's really wrong rather than what they're saying is wrong, and then fix the core issue, right? And then repeat this cycle. And you repeat this, like you iterate forever. Like this will never end. Basically, big organizations fail because they have opted out of this cycle, right? So many times you see huge companies like their products suck. It's because they have stopped listening to their users, right? Like instead of product people, sales people are running the company. So all a startup operation is basically you're getting user feedback, whether it be you directly talking to users, which is the best. The second best is you use tools that basically measure how users are reacting to your each iteration of the product, and then you just code and you release another version of it, and then you repeat it till you get to product market fit. So I just want to briefly talk about product market fit. I should have included that slide here, but essentially the whole point of becoming a startup success is getting to product market fit, right? So what does that mean? So you have a theoretical market, right, for your idea, but nobody cares about it. That's what happens. Like you post your idea, you post some app, and nobody downloads it, right? That means it's a product, but there is no product market fit. Now, how do you get a product market fit? It's simply this. You keep getting feedback, code, and then repeat. And By measuring this feedback, you will figure out where users are getting more engagement and where users are like, and you want to avoid all the meh part of the products. You want to really focus on the few features that really matter. Maybe it's just one feature that really matters. I don't know how many people use Calendly, but Calendly is a very simple app, and it's like a multi-billion-dollar company now. I think it does one or two things, but it does them perfectly. Same as Zoom, right? Zoom doesn't do everything, but it does that one thing absolutely perfectly. So I'll give one quick example. So when Instagram launched, it was called Bourbon. It was really a app to check in. At the time, check-in apps were all the rage, and they had 80 users, 80. And for a long time, they were like, okay, we don't know what we're going to do. Kevin's sister went on a vacation. His girlfriend said, well, I take photos, but I won't put photos on your app because they are crappy. He said, how can I improve them? She said, use filters. Rest is history. But the important nuance there is that they measured and found out that the engagement in the app was not for check-ins, but posting photos. So they measured the feedback even with just 80 users. And then they pivoted the app completely to just be about photos, right? And then Kevin's sister asked his girlfriend. So that's like literal user interview. And that one change, right? And if you remember way back when, it was just, hey, this cool photo sharing app with filters. And that took Instagram to like $1 billion valuation and even further. I mean, now I know they have a ton of features, but 80-90% of it was just that. So product market fit is very important. It's very hard to get a product market fit. You have to talk to your users. You have to measure. And maybe next time I'll put this chart on it, but it's called the trough of sorrow. Like you have this long slog of just doing this till like your product suddenly is no longer you're no longer pushing it on people. They are just like banging down your doors and asking for the product, and that's when you know you have product market fit. If you're still calling people, calling investors, that's not product market fit. Investors should be literally mailing you money. Wiring you money into your bank account without even you knowing, which is literally what happened with PayPal. They literally got money and they couldn't return it because the investors refused to tell them who they were. Like they literally, that's what they did. So that's product market fit, right? You'll feel this overwhelming, like everybody wants a piece of you and you can't support the demand. If you don't have that, you don't have product market fit. So really quickly, I want to cover sales and marketing. So there's so many ways to go about it, but the product focused approach is you just build up products in such an insanely great fashion that people want to tell their friends to download the product, right? And as you're all from computer science, I'm hoping. And if you see 2 to the 10 is 1,000, 2 to the 20 is 1 million, 2 to the 30 is 1 billion. So word of mouth is very, very powerful. If one friend tells two friends and that happens, 10 times is 1,000, you see how it's going. 20 times is 1 million, 30 times is 1 billion if the tree starts expanding. I don't know if you can see this, but basically all the top ones are their advertising budget is Toyota, BMW, Honda, Audi, Ford, Cadillac, Porsche, and you'll see Tesla 0% paid advertising. Everybody else's advertising budgets. Tesla's is entire advertising budget is zero. Their PR department is Elon Musk's Twitter account. It's the most valuable auto company in the world. So if you have an insanely great product, people will talk about it to their friends. And especially in today's world where we're all connected, that's literally the fastest way to do it. If you try to do sales and marketing, it, to me at least, it comes across as inauthentic. I recently looked at a really great quote, which was basically advertising or marketing is the tax you pay relative to how crappy your product is, right? So I mean, it's the same thing. Like Tesla had zero advertising budget, so did Google, right, for the first 15, 20 years. So did Amazon. Like it's just product. The other thing to understand is exponential growth, right? So imagine you're building, for simplicity's sake, a social app. If you grow week over week 1%, right? Week over week is like every week you grow 1% over 1% over 1%. Year at the end of the year, you'll be, let's say, almost 2 times let's say your users or revenue or whatever it is, right? But if you just grew 5%, at the end of the year, you will be 12x. If you grew 10%, at the end of the year, you would be 142 times the what you were on week one. Um, just to put it in another perspective, right? Let's say you have 5%. If you have 1% week over week growth, at the end of the year, you're, let's say, like 2x, right? Let's put that in revenue terms. If you have 5% week over week growth, you can go. I think it's like you can go from $8,000 per month to something like 24 million or some crazy number in 4 years. And that's just a difference from 1% week over week to 5% week over week. So it's very important to understand the power of compound interest and try to have a healthy 5 to 10% growth rate. Nowadays, people, venture capitalists look for like 50% growth month over month. And it's just like, it's the most powerful force in the world, compound interest, like Einstein said. And this is called, if you guys don't know already, it's called the hockey stick graph. And if you see how an exponential graph works, right, it's always looks like nothing in the beginning. And then suddenly all the growth happens in the end. And that's really important to understand. In fact, that's why many people choose not to do startups and instead go to like normal careers, because it's the difference between a linear growth versus exponential growth. If you're in startups, you will maybe not succeed for years, and then suddenly you will have an overnight success, right? Whereas if you're just going job to job, you get 20% increase in salary, so you're growing linearly. Exponential growth basically looks like it doesn't happen at all, and then it happens all at once. So it's really important to understand exponential growth if you want to do startups. It's not linear. It looks very different. It looks like nothing for a long time, and then everything happens towards the end. That's what it. Here's another example. So Warren Buffett, right? He was a pretty consistent investor in terms of his strategies over his lifetime, right? 95% of his net worth came after the age of 50. It's not that he suddenly got cleverer at the age of 52. It's just that's how compound growth works. So please look into it. It's not very intuitive for human beings to understand this. We really think in linear terms because we age in linear terms. Everything we see grows linearly, but startups grow exponentially, and technology also grows exponentially. So without further ado, just want to quickly go over AI specific advice if you want to start an artificial intelligence startup. So the number one mistake people make is they start with the technology or the models or something like that and forget that there is real people who you're trying to sell this stuff to, right? So start with the people. If you're not a domain expert in an area, you should partner with one, whether it be your co-founder, or you should try to pilot your product in a company for free so that you can get the end user talking to you and giving you that feedback that we talked about earlier, right? The second mistake people make is they take like a sample data and build an AI model and try to impress people. Nobody cares, you have to show results with the real data. Again, the only way this can happen is if you really partner with the people you're trying to solve a problem with and get the real data and try to prove it to them that your models are actually valuable. And actually your results are valuable rather than the models. They could care less about your models. They really want to improve the metrics. You need to find out what are those metrics that are important to their business. And if you can show them you can improve the metrics, that's when you win, rather than saying, okay, I have the most efficient model, but they're like, okay, but how does that translate to me in revenue or cutting down my losses? Third thing, especially if you're trying to do this in a B2B scenario, so there's two kinds of data, right? You have like this public data, you can just scrape whatever, but there's a large amount of data that is tabbed data that's basically within databases. Think like credit card information, think credit scores, think health data. There's all this data that is not available online, right? Now, let's say you're trying to build a healthcare startup or a fintech startup. You're not going to have this data. So how do you solve for this? You have to build relationships. You have to have the first believer invest in you, partner with you, you partner with them, you work with them almost for free for a while, so that just that you can know, understand, and learn how their industry works. And then you build the trust to get access to real data, right? Using that, you can prove out your prototype, your product, sell it to them, get them to invest in you because they don't want you to go out of business, right? Because you're starting to become like a real vendor to them. Then you can take that to like 100 other people, right? This access is really important. The relationships are really important. Um, and you can see like all this AI specific advice is not AI. And the reason I'm saying this is because we have gone through this. We've made all these mistakes. We just made a frontal attack on the problem. Oh, we're just gonna use the best AI, latest paper and models and solve risk for the world, right? That doesn't work that way. I mean, look at, if you don't believe me, look at Tesla, right? For 10 years, they've been saying full self-driving, and they're getting there, but it's hard, and even with whatever their $700 billion valuation. So as a startup with not that many resources, you have to really like work with people, get access by building real relationships, partner with them, and really learn the domain. If you don't understand the domain, your models are just not gonna map to the real world, right? So if you want to build a risk analysis tool, you almost have to start thinking like a risk analyst. Only then you can define the parameters that are really important. Um, Use a modular approach when you go to like a legacy industry and say, okay, I'm going to change the whole industry with AI. It's very naive. There's a lot of resistance to change. So just pick one, pick a very small version, solve that one, prove yourself, then move to the next one. And the last point is change is hard, especially if you're bringing something like AI, or maybe, I don't know, tomorrow you'll bring blockchain to another area. There is existing families, careers, relationships built over decades or even more, all existing, right? And so if you come across as a threat, you're not going to get entry. So you have to be very careful, build deep relationships, go slowly before, right, earlier, and bring people along with you. Don't try to replace people. That's also not going to work, especially in terms of AI. I think human plus AI is a more effective model than just AI, especially in sophisticated things, right? Maybe writing, singing, all the creative endeavors. You have human creativity that is enhanced by AI, in my opinion. And then really quickly, before we end, startup mistakes, don't plan for scaling day one. You know, how am I going to take it if 100 million people join? Well, first get the first user, so just get the initial thing done. Don't try to say, okay, how am I going to raise money to have 1 billion users? Well, you don't have 1 billion users right now. Just try to get the initial. Just don't say something to the effect of, well, I have found this cool AI model. Now let me see what it does. Try to first find the problem you're trying to solve, then see if the technology is even necessary for that. Another one is hard is valuable, not necessarily. Something easy might be even more valuable. And just because something is hard, you might be working hard at it, does not mean the end result is valuable. One example is someone who day trades for 20 years versus someone who bought Bitcoin in 2013 and did nothing, right? One trade made way more money than someone who's day trading for 20 years. So hard does not mean valuable. Another one is bad ideas suck. Not necessarily. Airbnb is a combination of two bad ideas, right? I want to let a stranger stay in my place, or I want to go and stay with strangers, right? Everybody's moms told them that's horrible. The combination of them is Airbnb. It worked fine. Another one is my idea is taken. No, like there's Discord, there's Slack. Everybody's with the same, even with the same problem, everybody will have their own angle. So just if it speaks to you, just start working on it, right? Fear of sharing ideas, not a really good thing. Nobody's really going to do your idea. Apple or Google would rather just buy you for 10 million than invest all their resources to compete with a small startup. And related to that, don't obsess over competitors. It's startups mostly die of suicide, not of homicide. Basically, there's no other way to put it. Don't care about your. It's basically like you're running a marathon and you see someone is running, faster than you. Well, you just run faster. You're not looking at them. You just have to increase your speed. So, in summary, make something people love, make something unique, futuristic, contrarian, launch fast and iterate on feedback, and just do it step by step. Only get to the next step that gets to more users or revenue, and ignore all the noise around startups. And that's pretty much it. Any questions? Maybe I should stop sharing my screen. If you don't have any questions, we're done. We're able to hear it, Mithri? Oh, okay, cool. We have some questions here. How do you find people that have the skill set you need, and how do you get them as passionate about the idea as you? Yeah, that's a great question, Shelling. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. Um, so you as a founder have to really sell the idea to your initial team, your initial investors, and each one will love the idea for a different reason. That's the challenge, right? Everyone we have hired, like they have different motivations in life, and you have to sell the idea to that motivation. No one person, no 100 people will not join OpenAI for the same reasons, for example, or Tesla, or Google, or Amazon. They each will join for different reasons. You have to find out what they care about and sell that to them. But even more important than that, I think initially you just have just work with friends, I would say, because the hardest part of a startup is things get really bad, and sometimes like the only way you're gonna keep going is if you're working with your friends, and that's the part of the startups nobody likes to talk about, but that's going to happen. You're gonna have very high highs and very low lows, and again very high highs, and throughout that you want people who way before the startup, so they're gonna be there for you, and they're not gonna bail out just because some thing stopped working. Cool. So I think, any other questions? Hope that was a useful answer. I'm just gonna put my email here just in case you wanna get in touch with me later. But yeah, I mean, I understand. It's like starting startups is hard, and it's still not popular way to go in Dallas. But I hope it changes, especially with people who are in hackathons, because I think that's the right kind of mindset. It's the disruptive mindset, right, or innovative mindset. So, okay, any other questions? We're good to go.
Yep, I think that is all for now.